No.
I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Pat, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Good morning. City of Avondale, Harold Seguina.
Present.
City of Buckeye, John Willett or James Shano. City of Chandler, Ryan Peters.
Present.
City of El Mirage, Amber Wakeman. Town of Fountain Hills, Dave Trimble.
Here.
Town of Gilbert, Mary Goodman. City of Glendale, Kevin Phelps.
Here.
City of Goodyear, Keeney Knudsen. Maricopa County, Jason Matthews. City of Mesa, Jody Sorrell. Present. City of Peoria, Chris Hallett.
Present.
City of Phoenix, Mario Paniagua.
Here.
Town of Queen Creek, Shay Yoakum. City of Scottsdale, Mark Melaninchenko.
Here.
City of Surprise, Tracy Montgomery.
Present.
City of Tempe, Lizette Camacho. City of Tolleson, Reyes Medrano. Here we are, ready to proceed.
All right, thank you, Pat. Just a reminder, all meeting attendees, please mute your microphone or phone while attending. And if you would like to ask a question or make a comment during the meeting, please type your comment in the box and it'll be read aloud and answered, or feel free to raise your hand as well. Agenda item 1, the public will be provided with an opportunity at this time to address the committees on non-agenda items and all action agenda items for the joint, the RPTA and the Valley Metro Rail meeting agendas. Up to 3 minutes will be provided per speaker unless the chair allows more time at my discretion. A total of 15 minutes for all speakers will be provided. Pat, do we have any public comment?
No, sir, not today.
All right, thank you. Item 2, CEO report. Jessica McFamily will provide this report.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I have just a few items to provide you with updates on today. But first, I'd like to share a little bit of the collateral from our ongoing safety campaign, which focuses jointly on bus and rail. These are safety tips that are shared and really geo-targeted around the bus system and rail system, specifically hotspots. You may have already seen some of this content on variable messaging billboards out there. You can also check it out at valleymetro.org/stay safe. Our bus safety tips are focused on reminding pedestrians and motorists to stay alert, never running alongside a bus, and then when driving in their own vehicle to maintain a safe distance from vehicles. Our rail safety tips remind our public that trains are quiet. They can sneak up on you. We want the public to avoid walking on or near the tracks and obeying traffic signals when crossing the tracks. We've done the geo-targeting. We did a first phase, and so now we're in the midst of a second phase that will end in late May with new messages, new visuals to keep the campaign fresh. Also coming from our communications team, I want to share an update on sharetheride.com and just give a little background on what it is. Sharetheride.com is our free online commute matching system. It really is a tool that helps match commuters with fellow commuters that may be available for a carpool or any one of our van pool programs. And I am pleased to report that we are seeing significant growth in van pool participation of late. Today, we have over 16,000 members participating on sharetheride.com and 540 employer subnetworks. Those are networks of employees who are working together to find ways to share rides across the valley and throughout Maricopa County. Next month in April, we'll be coming back to this committee to request approval for a new platform vendor for sharetheride.com. Again, that's a tool, not just a website. On South Central, we are making great progress. We are at 96% completion. Last week, we conducted our operational hazard assessment walk as well as our FTA quarterly visit. It was a strong visit, good feedback from FTA and our partners, our PMOC and our ADOT state safety oversight partners. If you've not had the opportunity to visit the project on the corridor, I encourage you to do so. And you can see our stations downtown. It's really wonderful to be able to kind of see, feel, touch these new stations. It really does look and feel like an open rail alignment. We're not quite open yet. We have begun testing and soon pre-revenue operations. And we are working to ensure safety throughout the project because it still is an active project. And while most of the construction is complete, much of the remaining work is electrical in nature. So we are taking great care to create a safe environment. Coming up a week after next is Transit Employee Appreciation Day. This is an event we highlight every single year. We will have events out engaging our workers, especially our frontline team members who are responsible for delivering the service, maintaining our transit vehicles, and keeping our customers safe and secure out there. So next month, I look forward to sharing a little bit of results and photos from Transit Employee Appreciation Day. Looking ahead, I invite you, speaking of South Central, to join us this Saturday, March 8th. We're conducting an event at our new or soon to be new end of line station at Central and Baseline Avenue. We're going to celebrate the first train operating from downtown all the way south to Baseline. This is an event for the public. It's from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. This is at our Park and Ride at Central and Baseline. We will have elected officials from City of Phoenix making remarks. There will be a community barbecue in partnership with our contractor, Kiewit. Then looking further ahead, on March 20th, we have our Board of Directors meeting and retreat. We'll be in this room. It's for an extended time window, 11:15 to 2:15. We're 10:15. Sorry. Oh, it's 10:15. Even better. I did ask Pat for an additional hour. We've got a lot to cover. Our agenda today is relatively brief because we're working to try to preserve as much time as possible on March 20th for retreat content so that we don't have a terribly long March business agenda. That means we will have a bit of a longer agenda coming up in April. We do want to try to maximize in-person participation for our board members who are available. Staff, TMC, RMC members are also welcome to attend in person or virtually for the retreat. And then we'll be back on our regular schedule in April. So that April meeting I mentioned for this committee is going to be on April 2nd at 11 a.m. Mr. Chair, that concludes my remarks. Are there any questions about those items I may answer?
Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3, minutes from the February 5th TMC RMC meeting are presented for approval. Are there any questions or items that need to be pulled for discussion? Not, I'll request a motion in a second to approve the February 5th TMC RMC minutes.
Move approval. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion carries. Travel and expenditures. Any questions from the committee? This item is presented for information only. Seeing none, report on current events and suggested future items. Are there any of these from the committee? Seeing none, the next meeting of the TMC RMC is scheduled for Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025 at 11 a.m. Now we're going to convene the TMC committee. The consent agenda is presented for action. Are there any questions or any items that need to be pulled for separate discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to request a motion and a second to approve consent agenda items 1A and 1B.
Harold from Avondale approve to move forward.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any-
Chair, I missed the second. Oh, thank you.
Are there any opposed? All right, seeing none, the motion carries. Item 2, fiscal year 24 Regional Public Transit Authority Annual Comprehensive Financial Report and Single Audit Reporting Package. The annual reporting package is being presented for information. Formal action on this item will take place at the March 6th Audit and Finance Subcommittee meeting. Are there any questions on this item? All right, seeing none. Item 3, the RPTA fiscal year 26 preliminary operating and capital budget. Jessica Meffer-Miller will introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is our first overview for this committee of our FY26 operating and capital budget. This overview has been shared with the Audit Finance Subcommittee, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Kessler to present.
Thank you, Jessica. Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
You know what, can I just pause for a second?
Sure.
I'm reminded that this budget year, I want to make you aware of a little bit different approach to our budget. In prior years, we've ended the year with rather significant overruns for RPTA and VMR. This year, I tasked staff with building that baseline from our actuals and looking at every expense category so that we could bring those to zero and really build them up to that which we actually need. That being said, this year, there is a relatively small growth in the budget. I don't expect that very low continued growth every year moving forward. I do expect that at the end of the year, we will arrive, our actuals and projected budget will arrive closer in line than we have in the past. There's a little bit of a risk there, but I think it's important and prudent that we be very judicious in projecting what we're going to spend, when we're going to spend it, include that in the budget. And that then in turn helps member communities plan your budgets without us assuming there's going to be a significant underrun. So you'll see this bear out in the numbers. And as we advance the budget and provide more detail at each of our meetings through the rest of the fiscal year, you'll be able to take a look at these initiatives and the underlying assumptions and see that. Okay. All right, now Ken.
Thank you, Jessica. Okay, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, today I'll be providing a high-level, overview of the FY26 RPTA budget. Next month, we'll be going into more detail. Later this month, we'll go into detail with the Financial Working Group and RTAG committees, and then next month through the board process, we'll be going into those details as Jessica alluded to. So highlighting here for the FY26 preliminary budget, bus operations, gross operating costs of about $139 million, projecting fare revenues to be fairly flat. We're staying conservative there with the new fare system only having a few months data at this point. We didn't want to be too aggressive there, so we'll see how the fare revenues play out here throughout the rest of this fiscal year and see how things go moving forward with the new fare system. And then in terms of paratransit operations, about just under a $27 million operating cost budget for paratransit in FY26 with fare revenues just a little tick higher than we have in the current year budget. And then moving on to ride choice, gross operating costs budgeted for FY26 at this point of $16.4 million. And budgeting revenues at about 1.3 million, just a little higher than they were last year, or the current fiscal year. And then looking at a breakdown of the total RPTA operating and capital budget, you can see that passenger services makes up nearly half of the budget for RPTA, with the VMR capital program making up about 19% at the next largest share. And just as a reminder, the PTF funds that do go into the rail capital projects do flow through RPTA as RPTA administers those funds and passes them through to VMR. And then in terms of the sources, the largest sources here for the FY26 overall operating capital budget, largely public transportation funds and member city contributions making up the majority of that. And then on the use of funds for the operating budget specifically, fixed route operations at about $170 million for next year. Demand service, that's paratransit ride choice services at 63 million overall for FY26, and regional services at about 25.9. Just want to mention that the regional services numbers in the last couple of days, we've been kind of looking into some of these numbers, so that will change a little bit in next month's presentation. That will be down about $500,000 or so as we fine tune the numbers going forward. And then the sources on the operating side of the budget, again, the public transportation funds making up the majority on the RPT operating budgets, followed by member city contributions. And then on the capital budget, fleet and debt service making up the majority of our capital budget. Just note here that this debt service will all occur in July. It'll be the final payment on our debt that was issued several years ago. So this debt service will be coming off the books after FY26. And then on the sources that fund our capital program, primarily public transportation funds and federal funds that fund that program. And then on pass-throughs, again, as I mentioned, RPT administers all the PTF funds, and there's a number of pass-throughs to VMR, as well as the fact that, a reminder that all employees of the agency are technically RPTA employees. So those costs reflect on the RPTA books, and those costs are passed through to VMR as part of these pass-throughs. And then we also have the Arizona lottery funds, which we receive and administer on behalf of the members, and we distribute those funds to the member agencies during the year. And then the sources for pass-through, of course, the Arizona lottery funds. There's a little bit of regional area road fund. That's basically the freeway and the street side of the regional sales tax. And then reimbursements from VMR for personnel, and then the allocation for PTF funded capital on the VMR side. And here's just a recap of the process that Jessica alluded to in terms of the timing, the various presentations on the budgets through the planned May adoption of the RPTA and VMR budgets. So we'll be going to the various committees and the board throughout the next several months, presenting a little more detail and answering any questions and making any adjustments based on feedback we receive. So
If it may, Ken, that March 18th date, the review of detailed initiatives with staff, this is really the critical point at which we're seeking feedback from city staff on those specific initiatives. Baseline assumptions presented here today have already been presented to Financial Working Group and RTAG. So it would be helpful for TMC, RMC members to flag that and have those discussions with your staff so that we can move the process along. We've got pretty detailed summaries of each of those new initiatives that will be delivered in a packet. I think we're completing that by tomorrow, so that we have that out for the Financial Working Group coming up. So just flag that.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that the last 2 or 3 years since we've kind of presented the budget in this format, we've gotten a lot of great feedback as we've gone through the details from city staff as well as the management committees and the board. So I think presenting those details in that manner has been really helpful to help everybody understand and get good feedback from our members to make adjustments to the budget as we go forward. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Kevin.
Yeah, I'll go back to slide number 2 and kind of walk me through. I'm having a little bit hard time reconciling. So it looks like we're projecting that our total number of passenger boarding is going to go about 15.5%, if those numbers are correct. And then we look at the amount of miles delivered is only about a 1% increase. And then I'm looking at fare revenue being relatively flat. So I'm missing something here but can you kind of explain why we're showing a fairly significant amount of boarding increase, but it's not being reflected in the other elements of the slide?
Yeah, so the passenger boardings, that estimate is developed by the service planning group. In terms of the fares, normally the fares would probably be a little more in line with that growth in the ridership. But given where we're at with the new fare collection system and having very little data yet, we wanted to be a little more conservative on the fare side because the fares impact how much we bill the member city. So if we overestimate on the fares and at the end of the year we come in under on fares, then we're likely going to have to ask all the member cities for some additional funds to make up that difference. So on the fare side, we prefer to be a little more conservative. And I think in years going forward, once we have some solid data from the new fare system, we'll be able to more, confidently and accurately forecast those fares. But since we're in a transition period, we're just really literally just 2 or 3 months of data using the new fare system completely, after we actually sunset the old fare media. We just wanted to make sure we're a little more conservative on the fare estimate.
Okay, I think the cities would have probably obviously appreciate that. I don't know if I'd use the term a little bit more conservative, but it seemed to be relatively aggressive on being conservative, but I understand the rationale, so thank you.
Yeah, I think in going back to my earlier point, Mr. Chair, Mr. Phelps, we're zeroing out some of the expenses elsewhere in the budget. So we anticipate we're operating at a pretty narrow margin. This will be our first year with our new fare collection system data. That being said, we do expect a higher fare box recovery per passenger because this being the RPTA budget, because we have functioning fare boxes on all of the vehicles. We have passes in the hands of customers. The reduced fare eligibility is now being enforced with smart cards that tie back to that individual's profile. So we think that's been an area of waste, fraud, and abuse that we should be reducing, not eliminating entirely, nonetheless reducing. I expect we'll see more boardings because we know over the course of the last few years, as that fare equipment has become obsolete, it's been difficult to maintain. And so we haven't been collecting data. We have been triangulating fare box ridership data against automated passenger counter, which is infrared sensor data, to try and get a more accurate picture, but that doesn't always help us capture the revenue. So hopefully we can come to you a couple of quarters into FY26 with reports that we're exceeding our fare revenue expectations.
Thank you. Lizette.
Chair, we saw a significant increase in streetcar security in Tempe, about 51%. And first of all, thank you for meeting with our staff and providing additional detail. We were expecting maybe a smaller increase because the hourly rate for security costs actually went down with the new contract. So I was hoping to get additional detail on why that cost increased significantly by 51%. Our transit operation is dependent on sales tax. And as you all know, we lost the ability to tax residential rental, and our fund is expected to lose about 9% of its revenue. So moving forward, we're not expecting such huge increases, but again, a little bit of details on why an increase of 51%.
I can, Ms. Camacho, Mr. Chair, thank you. I can speak to the details of security operations and the new contract. But first, Mr. Kessler, will you speak to the increase Ms. Camacho is referring to, the 51%?
Yeah, so
and we don't have that in front of us because that's a Valley Metro Rail budget item. So I wonder if we should move, if we should take.
Oh, well, you know what? I might be in the wrong agenda.
If you please, Ms. Camacho, Mr. Chair, if we could shift that conversation to the Valley Metro Rail discussion when we're looking at that budget, I think it would be helpful.
Okay, that works.
Yep. Are there any other questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, just a reminder, this is for information only. Agenda item 4, report of current events and suggested future agenda items. Any member have any reports on current events or any future agenda item requests? Seeing none, the next meeting is Wednesday, April 2nd at 11 a.m. With that, this meeting is adjourned.
Okay.
Listen to what Pat tells me to do.
Appreciate that.
Ready? Okay, well, we'll convene the meeting of the March meeting of the Rail Management Committee meeting. Item agenda number 1 is the minutes. So the minutes from the February 5th RMC are presented for approval. Does anybody have any edits or comments on the minutes? Seeing any, do I have a motion and a second to approve the February 5th RMC meeting minutes?
I move approval.
I second.
We have the first motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So those pass. Item number 2 is the annual comprehensive financial report and single audit reporting package that is being presented for information. Formal action on this item will be taken at the March 6th Audit and Finance Subcommittee meeting. Does anybody have any questions on this item? Seeing none, we'll move to item number 3, which is the Valley Metro Rail fiscal year 26 preliminary operating and capital budget. Jessica, would you like to introduce this item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I would like to just introduce Ken Kessler. So the same preamble as prior applies. The operating and capital budget is again really focused on zeroing out and building up. I do want to note that for FY26, we do intend to be operating at 12-minute service frequency on light rail, coincident with the opening of the South Central Extension, which will occur just a little bit in advance of the beginning of FY26. Mr. Kessler.
Thank you, Jessica. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is a high level look at the budget this go around. And we'll get into those details with your staff at the next meetings and the next board cycle. So looking at light rail operations, looking at $106.8 million gross operating cost for that budget. Fare revenues, again, projecting to be fairly flat, again, being conservative at about $6.8 million. On streetcar operations, total gross operating costs in the budget for next year, $8.3 million, with fare revenues to be projected at $254,000. We do have plans. We've been coordinating with the city of Tempe to install and open the new ticket vending machines on the streetcar alignment this summer. And then for our project development program, a number of projects here, $21.8 million in the budget for next year. You can see some of the projects moving forward as far as Rio East Dobson and some of the project development work on I-10 West, as well as systems planning and capital development administration. And looking at the total operating capital budget for Valley Metro Rail, passenger services and capital activities, pretty much both about half of the budget there. With the growing system, we'll continue to see the capital side as a fairly robust portion of our overall operating and capital budget. And then on the source of funds here, primarily for the total operating capital program, primarily funded by federal funds and public transportation funds and member city contributions on the operating side. And looking at VMR by program, so on the light rail program, as I mentioned, about $106.9 million budget. The increase there, most of that is due to the full annual operations of the South Central alignment going into revenue service later this spring. And then we do have streetcar at about $8.3 million for next fiscal year. And happy to address questions on the streetcar security at this point.
Chair, if you don't mind me repeating my question for the record. Again, we didn't expect a significant increase in streetcar security because the hourly rate with the new agreement went down. As I mentioned earlier, our transit fund is dependent on sales tax, and cities lost the ability to tax residential rental. And our transit fund is losing 9% of their revenues due to that. Again, thank you for meeting with our staff and providing additional detail, but also wanted to know why a significant increase at 51%.
Yeah, so thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. As you mentioned, we did meet with Tempe staff, I believe it was last week, and kind of went through some of the details of what's in the contract cost as well as the budget. The budget does include other items besides the contracts. There's stuff like our staff and things like that. And there are some additional resources going into the staff resources going into this budget for safety and security going forward. And so those are part of the additional items that are driving an increase in the overall cost of the security program.
Chair, if I may.
Thanks.
What percentage of the additional staffing cost is causing that increase? So if you break that out, what would that be?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I don't have that specific percentage off the top of my head, but we can certainly get that and share that with you and your staff.
Thank you.
Ms. Camacho, if it pleases you, I think what might be helpful is for us to break down the expenses in the operating budget for security in the FY25 budget for streetcar, and then a breakdown in the expenses for the FY26 budget. If we could do that by line item, Mr. Kessler, I think that would be helpful. And if you could, Mr. Kessler, clarify for me, does this budget reflect our original projections or expected projections for the new fare inspection security services contract, which has not yet been awarded?
Yes, it does reflect the cost of the new contract.
Thank you.
Thank you. The line and item detail will help.
Okay, so moving on to the sources of funds for the operating budget. Again, largely operations funded by member city contributions, as well as fare revenues. And then on the capital side, the capital program, again, a decrease going into FY26 as some of the larger projects come to an end, with South Central wrapping up and Northwest Extension Phase 2, some final trailing costs there. And so the program's about $114.5 million for FY26. And then the sources for the capital program, again, largely federal and public transportation funds that fund the capital budget. And then this is just that same slide from the RPTA presentation on the budget process and the dates. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any additional questions.
Any additional questions for Ken on the budget? Okay, guess we don't have any, Ken. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is report on current events and suggested future agenda items. Does anybody have anything to report on or any agenda items they would like to add? Not seeing any, so the next meeting of the RMC is Wednesday, April 2nd at 11 a.m. Thank you.